I didn't realize it had been 3 years until I saw that same headline. It occurred to me like, wow, it's been 3 years now. Because, we put Wolves out and it still felt so newish because we've been touring it and playing it around the world and bringing the record to fans. I didn't think about this as like the song that like heralded our return, but that it is. I love it. I love the song, the kind of the double down on the Rise Against mission. And I love that people are enjoying it. I grew up reading comics for sure. As a kid, like me and my little brother riding a bike to the newsstand with our allowance money, buying candy and comics, a lot of G.I. Joe, a lot of Punisher, that kind of stuff. But I never followed up with the comic world past my adolescence. And so this whole process was kind of my reintroduction. Like certainly I don't live under a rock, so I'm aware of like the giant movies and like the huge franchises. But like the whole graphic novel world and what comics have turned into, this was kind of my education in that, and I found it really interesting to see what the artists are doing. And I think that in the end, all of us, musicians, comic book artists and writers, we're all just storytellers. We're just telling stories. And so I think that when you just like for a Rise Against song, when you look past the fast drums and the power chords and I'm screaming in your face, there's a message, there's a story being told there, you know what I mean? And just like comics, when you look past maybe like the artwork that we kind of characterize as comic book artwork, there's also like in those lines, there's like, these authors are still talking about some pretty important and heavy things that people want to hear about. And that's how to me, that's like where change happens, just like I might be on my side of the fence and my friend's on his side of the fence, and nothing we say to each other is going to make us leave our tribe. I feel like trying to find that communication to get people to think outside their box and shed their preconceptions and biases. The only way you can do that is by telling a story, and the stories are what really hit people hard and what get them to kind of reconsider their positions. And that's what artists are. In the end, we're just storytellers. Almost all art is a serious medium simply because of the way that, I might be an artist, but I'm also the audience, and it hits us all in different ways that other mediums don't hit us. And so art is political, whether it's trying to be or not. That's what I've learned in the process of doing this song and talking to the authors and talking to the soundtrack people and talking to the artists, is that everyone is telling a story, and they're doing it in their own way. And within that story are themes about how they feel about humanity and the world around them, and power and powerlessness and struggle. And so there's important stuff happening even in the pages of a Batman comic, just like there's important stuff happening on the airwaves of the radio. I think that artists are tapping into the way people feel about the world around them. So I think that people, especially in this moment of reflection that we're all having, where we're kind of given this, we've been given this opportunity to step off the treadmill and kind of reflect on the direction that we're going in, and if it's the direction that we want to go in, or if it's something that we should be reconsidering. I feel like there's ways we're listening differently, you know what I mean? And that's an opportunity for a band like Rise Against to really be there for people who are listening and who are looking for something, and looking for someone to put into words, perhaps, like the way that they're feeling. We come from like this DIY punk rock background. Like everything we did, we kind of did it ourselves. And that same attitude applies to societal change. We can't rely on whoever's running for president this year, whoever ran for president 4 years ago, who's ever going to run for president 4 years from now. Like that's a cycle that will always be kind of like dangling the carrot in front of us. And so Rise Against wants to be a part of a community of artists that are trying to empower the audience to take responsibility for the direction of the planet. And that's a great metaphor to use. Like we are all superheroes. We're all our own heroes in that sense. Like you can't be waiting for someone else to come along. That's what participatory democracy is even. That's what being a part of like the fabric of culture is. It's to kind of weigh in. It's to kind of like put your thumb on the scales. It's to really kind of, if you see something that's happening and it happens so often that it turns into a cycle, the only thing that's going to stop that is disruption, you know, and disruption can be ugly and crazy sometimes. And we're seeing a lot of disruption happening here and now, but that disruption is sort of like the growing pains. And then after that comes growth. After that comes some sort of evolution, and the world looks more like an equitable place. Especially as a band that has never been shy about, you know, jumping headfirst into politics. I've seen political action stigmatized by youth culture in the last 20 years at different points, where like being part of a protest or singing a protest song was seen as cheesy or campy, you know? And there were artists that were sort of condemned for doing it, or people just kind of rolled their eyes at it. And if you were in the street holding a sign, there was a time in the last 10 years where that really just wasn't cool. You know what I mean? And people decided to put cool points on something as important as like societal change. And that was like a really like frustrating time to be alive, when you saw like there's something so important happening here. And it's hard to get young people to engage because apathy seemed to have a lot more currency. And nowadays, that has diminished. And it's so exciting to see that people understand how important it is to be in the streets, understand how important it is to not be silent about what's happening, and understand how important it is to participate in political outcomes. That's a cool thing, because I feel like when it was happening, when protest culture was being stigmatized by just kind of like culture in general, I didn't know how we were ever going to get out of that, you know, because those are powerful forces. Like being cool and hip, like, is a powerful force. You know, it's what drives a lot of things. And so when something as important as societal change was getting caught up in the gears of what's cool and what's hip, that was when I really worried about the future. And now you're seeing people sort of shed those labels, and now they just really care about the world they're going to grow up in, the world their kids are going to grow up in. And they realize that they got to put their hands in the levers a little bit, especially growing up in the punk rock and hardcore scene. Like it's sort of ingrained in you that electoral politics are bullshit, you know, and that everyone's bad and voting doesn't change anything. And it's Stalin versus Hitler, you know, all those kind of things. And I always had a problem with that tenet of like punk rock and hardcore. I always saw it as like really defeatist and kind of a cop-out, you know? It was like, it wasn't seeing the forest for the trees. It was like, there are real consequences to who you put in office. And even though, like, I'm sorry, but it's not the person isn't the perfect choice for you. You know, there are real consequences by sitting elections out, you know, and there are people that get hurt. And I feel like the music community and the audience are starting to realize that a little bit. They're starting to realize that it actually matters, you know, that we would be living, these last 4 years have really mattered. You know what I mean? Like you can point to places, whether it's environmental change or immigration reform or gender equality, that would have been different depending on who was in office, you know? And so I think people are starting to get that. And I think it's exciting because as a band that's been around for 20 years, the music community did not always get that. And music fans were not always very receptive to that. It's no longer like your mom and dad's politics. It was cool to stay out of it 4 years ago. It was cool to say, oh, I don't know, they're both bad, I'm not voting. And now there's more people that will call you out on that. And by saying things like, don't you care about climate change? And if you do, there's a choice for you to have an impact on that. Don't you care about healthcare? Don't you care about, immigration reform or whatever? Because if you do, even though you may not identify with the personality that happens to be behind the microphone, that issue you care about is going to be decided one way or another. And so I think that people are starting to engage a little more. I remember reading an interview with Ian MacKay. He never really talks about electoral politics that much in interviews, but they asked him if he votes. And he said he always votes. And they said, well, who do you vote for? You vote Republican or Democrat? And he was like, I don't vote based on party. He said, I have an issue that's really important to me. That issue is war. To him, the issue is war. And he goes, I vote for the person least likely to send this country to engage in war. And he had a list of reasons, because war is not just a war, but there's a giant fallout for decades and of suffering, economical disadvantages to war. And I thought that was interesting because he sort of took the faces off politics and the sort of the TMZ of politics, and just boiled it down to this is what I care about. And I want to go into a ballot box and let the democracy I live in know that this is what I care about. I can tell you that we have not been lazy. We've not been sitting around doing just Zoom calls. We've been busy. We've been creating. And we've been kind of waiting for our moment to strike, I guess, too. Just sort of, we're watching the same headlines everybody else is heading. We're trying to be smart. And we want to sort of, like you said, this is our first new music in 3 years, so it's been a while, and we're ready to kind of jump back on the moving train of music culture, and we're just looking for kind of the right place to jump on, So, but I think our fans should know that we've been busy, so, and we're looking forward to seeing them again, and looking forward to them hearing what we're working on.